Charlie.
Yep.
Okay, next item on the agenda is receive and
You want
file
me to email it?
Yeah,
presentation
email it to me. Yep.
from city staff updating
Alright.
the fixed base operator
thank you.
status at the McCook's Wilson Airport.
It's been a busy couple of weeks out at the airport. Before we get started, I really do want to give a tip of the hat to Kyle and Kenny Bonds. They've done a fantastic job getting everything organized, and we're getting close to the point where we're ready to start fueling again. Again, I don't remember the date specifically, but on the Tuesday prior to November 15th, we had an opportunity to speak with Willow Aviation's owner. And at that time, had been informed that there was a possibility that a bankruptcy might be filed on the 15th. And so we started calling around, trying to come up with a plan of attack. Kyle and Kenny contacted the city of Kearney through Austin Lamming. He had some connections out there. We were able to go ahead and make another connection then with Av Fuel, so that way we could start the process of securing potential equipment, depending on what happened with the bankruptcy, if that were to have been filed, and then also information regarding fuel. We needed to make sure that we had an account set up and everything, and so Kyle and Kenny worked on the paperwork for that. We got everything turned in. Also that same week, we started trying to reach out to the employees at Willow Aviation, saying, hey, look, if it's possible, would you guys consider staying on, maybe as an independent contractor to the city of McCook, to make sure that we can provide fueling services. It's hard for people to understand, and I know that I didn't quite understand it when I first started this job, but the airport really is an extremely important feature that the city of McCook has going for it. We've got a lot of things out there that other communities don't have. And so we didn't want to see too long of a lapse if the bankruptcy were to have been filed without having fueling. And so we sat down, Nate, Kyle, Kenny, myself, some other staff members, I know Tara and Tracy were in there, trying to work through the details. We can't bring them on as an employee of the city because we've already established our employees for this budget year. Plus we started thinking about what does this look like as far as where we're going to come up with the funds to serve in this capacity for a period of time. So we'll be talking about that in a little more detail later on, but council contingency is kind of what we're looking at to try to bridge the gap between right now and when we're able to locate another FBO to serve the FBO services out there at the airport. On the 15th, the bankruptcy was filed. That was a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It's a liquidation, which basically means that everything gets sold off. We didn't have the ability to make any decisions once the Chapter 7 bankruptcy was filed. Assets, the buildings, all that stuff that's out there, whether it's equipment, buildings, whatever the case may be, it's all owned by Willow Aviation. And once the bankruptcy was filed, it became the possession of the Chapter 7 bankruptcy trustee. So that next week, we contacted the attorney for Willow Aviation. He gave us the name of the bankruptcy trustee. That Tuesday, we were able to make connections with the bankruptcy trustee and kind of explain to him what our concerns were. He understood. We also had a chance to speak with the secured creditor. They understood our concerns. They've been really good to work with, but there's just a lot of things that you have to take into consideration when you're trying to take over this operation. And so, following our discussions with the trustee, we started working on a lease agreement. And again, that's another item that we're going to be looking at tonight. The lease agreement was basically for the city to be able to operate out of the essential buildings on the airport site that were owned by the FBO. Also, the equipment that was going to be essential to the operation of the fueling services, we needed to make sure that we had access to that. We needed to make sure that we protected the trustee. That was one of the things that the trustee said was, yeah, I'm willing to work with you, but you're going to have insurance and you're going to have to indemnify us. So we contacted Ben Kohler over at Ellerbrock Norris, and he started working on the insurance side of things for us. We started looking at all the things that could potentially be an issue. You know, whether it's property and casualty, liability. You know, we started talking about workers' comp with the independent contractors and whether you could go ahead and have workers' comp through the city, or whether we'd have to go in different directions since they weren't going to technically be employees. I started working on all those details. Eventually, last week, we were able to go ahead and strike a deal. I do have signed signature pages from both Nebraska Land Bank and the bankruptcy trustee. So right now we just need to have the signature on the lease from the city of McCook, and we've got a binding lease. The one nice thing that we have discovered throughout this process, the bankruptcy is going to stop any other revenue from going to the estate. It now will be ours, so we're going to be able to hopefully offset some of these expenses through the sale of fuel, which is great. You know, and we've been talking to the FBO's former employees to kind of get a feel for what the pricing may look like. I think we've got a pretty good handle on that right now. The other thing that we've been working on is the contracts with each of the former employees, and like I said, we've had to set it up as independent contractor contracts. And so they aren't going to be technically employees of the city of McCook. They're going to operate independently, but they're going to be able to provide the fueling services, and they all have the knowledge and the ability to perform out there. And they're all excited to get going. We were working with them today, trying to get some of the last second details included. You know, we were working through our insurance rep again, trying to make sure that we had the workers' comp set. We're trying to make sure that we have all of the insurance issues as far as the property and casualty taken care of. We've got a couple more questions on the liability side, but we're getting closer. It's our hope that we're going to be able to begin operations here shortly as far as fueling goes, and we do appreciate everybody's patience in this matter because there's been a lot of work that's been done to get to this point. But I think ultimately this is going to be a good opportunity for us. We've had some good conversations with people and have had an opportunity to kind of hear some of the concerns from some of the stakeholders out there, which has been great. One of the things that's also come from this, we had a good conversation with FAA and the Nebraska Department of Transportation last week about trying to reschedule. So right now we're in the middle of working on our ALP and AMP, and it's been about 2.5, 3 years that we've been working on that. And one of the things that was stressed during the construction of the ALP and AMP is that the airside needs of the airport were going to have to be taken care of first before we could actually start looking at the revenue side with respect to CIP projects out there, capital improvement projects out there. Well, we had a good conversation with FAA and NDOT here this last week, and they understand, you know, based upon our circumstances, there's nothing more important than making sure that we're able to provide fueling operations out at the airport. And so we are potentially, and it all depends on how everything flows. I don't want to jinx anything or get everybody's hopes up, but we might be able to go ahead and move forward a self-serving fueling station in front of some of the airside items that we know that we're going to have to take care of. That'll require some additional conversations, and we're actually going to have an airport advisory commission meeting this upcoming Thursday to kind of look at some different spots for where a self-service fueling station could go and not hamper the ability to function out there at the airport. So So that's one good thing that's come from this. I don't know, Kyle, Kenny, do you guys have some additional things? I know I forgot some stuff. There's just a lot of things that have happened over the course of the past couple of weeks.
The only thing I wanna add is, it's highly unusual for something like this to happen, to where a non-airside need gets bumped ahead of an airside need. So kudos to FAA and NDOT. The fueling station has been on our CIP data sheet, or on our list as a CIP data sheet for several years. But again, like Nate stated, the airside needs have to be done first. It's kind of like what happened with the hangar. We built a 6-place hangar several years ago. The only reason we got funding for that is because our airside needs were all done. We had to do easements and stuff like that prior to. And then we had all those completed at the time, so that allowed us to do a revenue generating project per se. But in my opinion, FAA and NDOT are going kind of out of the way to make this happen for us. Technically, the CIP, we had a CIP data sheet submitted to NDOT earlier this year, an updated one. Technically, your CIP data sheets have to be approved no later than April by the FAA and NDOT. Here we are December, and they're making an exception, so kudos to them for working with us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And we've got W Design working on cost estimates and whatnot, which will get forwarded then to the appropriate authorities. So, and our plan is to hopefully have that out by
Greg's already submitted, Greg submitted the estimate already this afternoon.
Oh, he did already?
Yep, and the
Great.
commission is going to be meeting on Thursday.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Did you have anything, Kenny?
No?
Kenny's done a fantastic job. I can't say enough
Course
good things
does.
about Kenny.
He's
I mean,
solid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we met with the Nebraska Land Bank representatives today, and there were no specific issues. We didn't have access to anything until this morning. So the first time that we were able to get inside of the hangars was today, because the bankruptcy trustee was the only one that had the authority to do so. So we had to have the lease in place before we could even do that. So, which I appreciate Nate moving so fast on that as well too. I mean, it's been crazy trying to get everything finalized, but I've got a great team and they do a fantastic job. So.
The other thing I want to state is appreciation for those employees, former employees of Willow Aviation too. They've stepped up and are willing to assist us like they are, so hats off to them as well, because without them, we wouldn't be near as far as we are today.
Great.
Yeah, so question was, is DAC still flying? And they are. They're fueling in Denver and then making a trip back to Denver. So, but we've had issues for general aviation. I know that we've had some concern expressed by FedEx and UPS, and I've been emailing back and forth with them, and then also had some emails back and forth with the hospital just to make sure that they were aware of what was going on. Spoke with Troy Bruns and also Dr. Lawton. So we've been trying to make sure that we are giving everybody the information that they need, letting them know kind of where we're at. Long term, we're not going to be able to provide FBO services just because our budget's not going to allow that. You know, that's been a question that's been brought up in the past. We don't have the ability to do that on top of everything that we're already doing. But that said, you know, this gives us an opportunity, hopefully, to find a good FBO that can serve in that capacity, and there is some interest that's been expressed, which is exciting. Now that we actually can have access to the facilities, I think that probably you'll see some companies want to come up and tour the facilities, so that way they can see with their own eyes what it looks like, and they can put pencil to paper to see if this is a good financial move for them to come to McCook. But I think long term, this is probably a good thing. Not to you know, besmirch anybody or anything like that, but at this point in time, I think that for us to move forward, I think that you know, having maybe some you know, fresh perspective and you know, a different way of maybe looking at the FBO services, it's probably a good thing for the city of McCook.
Great. Okay, next item, any other questions? Next item on the agenda is to ratify the lease agreement between the city of McCook and John D. Smallnaker,
Yeah.
Chapter 7 bankruptcy trustee for the bankruptcy estate, Willow Aviation and Spraying Incorporated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, council? Good.
Oh, as part of this lease agreement, I'll save these questions for the next item.
Okay, I mean, the lease agreement, Nate drafted it and
And I
then
stayed
the-
awake when I read it. That was amazing.
The Nebraska
Thank you.
Land Bank and the bankruptcy trustee, they had some suggestions, we were comfortable with the suggestions. Like I said, we're still kind of working through some of the insurance details, I'm hoping that maybe by tomorrow we have all that completed. Once we have the insurance solidified, I think that we're gonna be ready to go.
Okay.
Both the workers' comp and the property and casualty and liability, and the independent contracts as well too.
Okay. We're ready, Leanne. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay.
Oh, geez, mine just got smaller too. Five votes cast yea, no votes cast nay.
Next item on the agenda is to authorize the use of the City of McCook's City Council contingency line item to assist with funding fueling operations at the McCook-Ben Nelson Regional Airport during the pendency of the Willow County Aviation bankruptcy.
I move to authorize the use of City of McCook's City Council contingency line item 10 to assist the funding fuel operations at the McCook-Ben Nelson Regional Airport during the pendency of Red Willow Aviation bankruptcy.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
Okay, so lease gets signed, how soon can we start pumping fuel?
Like I said, this week is kind of our goal.
Okay.
I can't guarantee, so one of the things that we were talking to Ben Kohler about today was, as far as workers' comp insurance for the independent contractors, it could take a day to 2 days in order to get that up and running. Ben is gonna actually help each of those 3 individuals get secured through the pool. So we're trying to do whatever we can to expedite the process. It's just, it's gonna take some time for the pool to go ahead and say, yes, you know, we're gonna go ahead and qualify them to be a part of it.
Do we have fuel in the tanks out there now?
Yes,
We do, yeah, and,
That's part
yeah,
of it.
we've got tool in the tanks right now that also have fuel in those that we're, gonna be ready to start purchasing fuel from them here in the short term.
it takes about a day or 2 to get a transport here, so it's not a
Oh.
long.
Okay.
And we've got all the equipment, they've sent out the equipment, so we're ready to go.
That's the question is, equipment's in sound condition, are we gonna have to put any amount of money in the infrastructure of the refueling and or the equipment? Or was it maintained well, or is it just, we're gonna step in and take over?
We'll step in and take over. We talked to Zach today. He has a pretty good feel on what's going on out there. So if there are issues, he's gonna let us know. But he didn't say that there were any concerns off the top of his head.
Okay,
We do have a contingency plan in place in the event, because I'll be honest with you, the trucks out there are old. They are. If something were to happen, AF Fuel does lease trucks. So we do have a contingency plan. We're kind of on their radar in the event. Obviously, it costs money to lease them, but we do have that contingency. plan
Which is
in
something the
place.
city of Kearney had to do at one
Yeah.
point in time. We had a good conversation with Kearney about 3 years ago. Not quite the same set of circumstances, but they kind of through something somewhat similar. And so we were able to kind of touch base with their assistant airport manager, and they were able to kind of fill in what they did. And the AV fuel portion was very, very helpful. The information they gave us on the AV fuel portion was very helpful.
so the contingency fund is, you mentioned earlier, it finally clicked for me, is basically a bridge gap loan type of a situation.
Well,
We need that money to start operating right away.
right, yeah, and now the fueling side, you know, if we're able to go ahead and offset some of those expenses through the sale of the fuel, that's what we're gonna do. But we need to make sure that so we have nothing in our budget that allows us to take over the airport right now, and during this budget season, we all understand how tight everything is right now.
Yes, it is.
So the only resource that I could think of that we could actually tap into right now and feel comfortable that we're ready to go ahead and provide services right now is council contingency. So Leanne and Kyle and Tara and I, we all sat and talked about it. I have never asked for the council to use council contingency. I asked Kyle. Kyle said he's been here for 30 years and there's never been a request like this.
How about 50 years, Leanne?
We did for something, but I don't remember what it was. Very minor, let's put it that way.
What is
Electricity.
Do we have a
I can't remember what it
base
was.
timeline for
Probably
the
wasn't
contingency?
Well, so the problem with the bankruptcy is we don't know how long it's gonna take. I've read the petition. It's pretty lengthy. So it could take some time, but there are some things that maybe could happen in the interim. We're actually, so one of the things I forgot to mention, we're gonna meet with the bankruptcy attorney from Barrett Home tomorrow, via telephone, just to see if they could help represent our interest. But could we go in there and petition the court for relief to allow for us to, maybe start looking at the possibility of the sale of assets? If there was an FBO that was available, maybe that's something we could take a look at. I mean, these are all just hypotheticals right now. I'm not saying that it's gonna happen, but there are some things that maybe could occur during the course of a bankruptcy that might allow for us to expedite our end of things. But in the interim, we at least have to be able to provide fuel. I mean, that's the key out there right now for
That's
us.
priority.
We've gotta be able to provide fuel.
So with the numbers that Greg gave you this afternoon, do you think that contingency is gonna be enough to bridge it entirely, or do we have the danger of possibly needing to continue operation with no funds?
So with what Greg's working on, we actually, in our budget, we had $75,000.
Two different things.
Yeah, we had $75,000 set aside for the self-service fueling station.
Okay,
Sorry. It was the air side. I gotta make sure.
Displaced threshold.
So it was gonna be,
redesignation.
And then we had talked about some lighting,
Yeah.
some painting and some things like that.
okay,
But we already had $75,000 set aside for a 10% match of whatever FFA or FAA funds were designated for a project. Plus, there is the potential for maybe utilizing some other funds. We found out that we didn't get the Safe Streets for All grant. So there'd be $80,000 there that we could potentially utilize if we needed to, but I don't think we're gonna need to. The other thing that we found out was in 2025, as opposed to a 10% match, we're talking about a potential 5% match, which if that's the case, it's going to cut in half our obligation. So we've got the money there for the self-serving fueling station moving forward.
okay.
On the other end, of the council contingency, that deals with all the general fund items that occur out there. And again, we don't provide fueling services, we don't provide mechanical services. We just don't have the money to do that, and I don't know how in the world we would ever do that. But this does provide a stopgap to allow for us to get the independent contractors put into a position where they can begin the fueling process. We won't be able to do mechanical, we won't be able to do, the other items. But our hope is that by providing the fuel and then being able to move forward with the bankruptcy and potentially having our interest represented, and who knows what's gonna happen, but at some point in time, being able to get an RFP out there, maybe someone's interested. But like I said, I've had a lot of conversations with people over the course of the past 2 weeks. There is interest in McCook, but it's gotta make sense for these businesses to make it work. They'll come in and then we'll contract with them to provide the services. But the city of McCook is not going to be able to fund that ourselves. I mean, there's just no way. We're talking about the insurance cost for the premium for an individual, it's astronomical. Now, on an interim basis and at the city rate, it's probably going to be less. but it's an expensive proposition running an airport. And like I said, we're at 44 cents on our levy, 45 is our max, we can't go beyond that. Each cent represents $50,000 this year, something like that. There's no more money. And so we don't have the ability to do this, and that's why 95% of the communities out there, they contract with FBOs to provide those kinds of services, because they are essential to their community, but it's not a service that the cities are able to fund themselves. A Kearney, Nebraska, they can pull it off. You know, McCook, it's a little bit more difficult.
You said you got access to the facilities and everything, was everything maintained, or we're not gonna have to put a bunch of money into fixing anything per se?
No, we'll be fine there,
In
yeah.
good shape?
The lease does say that if anything breaks or needs repaired, we are responsible for it during the term of the lease.
But I don't think there are any real issues out there. One of the things that we do want to look at is that 8-plex and seeing if there isn't some way that we can get access. So that's part of the bankruptcy estate, but it's not really worth anything, just salvage. And so it'd be nice, because there's been some inquiry as far as locating a hangar at that spot. So we're gonna see if there isn't some wiggle room, maybe with the bankruptcy trustee, to scrap it. I mean, nobody really cares about the 8-plex hangar. That was the intent, you know, a couple of years ago when we had some interest in building a hangar at that location privately. So we surplused it, and now it's just been sitting out there for the past 5 to 6 years. But now, we might be able to move forward with an actual hangar project, potentially. Because like I said, we've been talking to some people that are interested in doing some things out there at the airport, so.
Thank you for answering all my questions, I appreciate it.
Are we ready for the question?
I've been asking questions, did I ask enough questions?
You did, yes.
Okay.
All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay.
Let's get this done.
5 votes cast yea, no votes cast nay.